Hello again, everybody, and welcome back to Wait, Are These Guys Friends? I am Mike. I am here with Randy. Randy, man, what's going on? What's your week been like? We talked a little bit beforehand, but anything fancy going on?
I meant to ask you, Mike, are you surviving amidst is the heat wave hitting your part of the country too? Are you melting? It was pretty brutal here yesterday. I don't know how it was where you are. I know we're not too far away, but
it is, except it was one of those things. We always talk about peeling back the curtain. How much do we talk about our real lives, et cetera, et cetera? And I am a freelancer in television broadcast. Many people who follow me on social media know this. This isn't like some dark secret. We just try to keep some pieces of our lives, regimented, whatever. But it was one of those awkward moments yesterday where it was 92 degrees. I was doing a soccer game and all of the camera people are dying. And I'm in the truck wearing a hoodie because I'm so cold because of the air conditioning in the truck to keep all the equipment cold. These trucks that we work in are often just ice boxes because I've been in trucks that overheat, all the gear shuts down. And so they have to keep these trucks ice boxes. So it's 92 degrees in the middle of Washington, D.C., in the city. Everyone's just sweltering hot and dying. The camera guys are on heads just like, we need a water break. We're going to step off for 5 minutes. Oh, just 3 of them back in a minute. Oh, my God. And I'm just sitting there in my hoodie like, ooh, I'm chilly. This is
your teeth are chattering. Oh, God, camera 4.
So I guess I would be saying is I'm doing fine because
Nice.
I'm soft and I sit inside in nice temperature controlled environments. So,
I had this great idea yesterday. Because I wanted to take the dog for a walk, but I didn't want to do it at the height of the 95 degree temperature that's going on here in the Northeast. But I tried to get ahead of it yesterday morning by going outside and take the dog for a walk at like 7:30 in the morning. And it was like 75 degrees, perfect, no problem. Like actually really pleasant to go do that at that time. And then like 3-4 hours later, like when my son's on summer vacation, so he got up and he wanted to work on lacrosse. So he's like, can we go over to the middle school and throw like lacrosse around? This is at 11:30 in the morning when it is 93 degrees out with 0 clouds in the sky. And so I got a firsthand indoctrination into the heat and the oppressive nature of it. It's lots of fun.
I didn't realize it's like you're one of those actors cutting weight for a role. You just had to go out and sweat for 90 pounds and put all your back into it and feel terrible.
Wearing a trash bag, all sorts of good stuff. So it's all for the podcast, Mike. So it just,
oh my
I
goodness.
guess for your video, right? Like, because we're the only ones that see each other. So
you'll look great. I've thought about that. Like every now and again, I want to do like a video segment with you, but then I realized that would mean that both of us have to clean ourselves up, clean our workspaces up, seem presentable. And also, like, to be fair,
a lot of work.
I don't know how obvious. It's probably not obvious. I hope it's not obvious because of editing. We stop so much during recording. I would say every one of our episodes, if we were to run it back like, all right, hit stop, let's go. I go, oh, perfect example. Last week's episode, at the time I believe this one's coming out, will have been, I think we recorded it and it was like 2 hours and 15 minutes. And then it came in at like 1 hour and 28 minutes. And I was just like, man, there's a lot of bullshit here. There's just a lot of bullshit I'm getting rid of on
this. You're doing yeoman's work as the editor of this podcast. So it's
and then also just to make you look bad at any point, I need to edit certain things out, obviously. So
that's the give and take of it. I decide not to edit, and so therefore I have to give up any humility that I ever had in my life.
And on that note, tell me about... No, I'm just kidding. What'd you watch this week? That's what you should tell me. What'd you watch?
So I'm going to be consistent here because it comes out every week, but I watched the latest episode of Clipped, which is really, really good. I continue to enjoy it and really be interested and fascinated by it.
I keep saying I'm going to start it, and I don't, and I watch other things. Based on everything we've talked about, I'm going to love it. Every ounce of me knows I'm going to enjoy this show, and I just haven't committed to it. But what you're saying is how many episodes in is this? 3, 4, more than that?
There have been 4,
and it's just keeping the momentum, holding up, still good.
It is. It was really fascinating. I listened to a podcast so this was based off of a article that was written on the, I guess now defunct pop culture sports website, Grantland. The author of that was on one of the podcasts that was breaking down the episode. But with the writer being on of the original article, one of the co-writers of that article is one of the consultants of the show. And so it was really interesting to have him on to just give his insights into what he talked about. The other thing that was kind of fascinating from the people that are on the current Ringer podcast that were all at Grantland, I guess, which was headquartered at LA Live right there by Staples Center. So this was happening in the backyard, like across the street. Staples Center is across the street from LA Live. So this was happening right near them as all this Donald Sterling stuff was happening. So it was very fresh in their heads of what was going on. So it was just fascinating to hear their take on it and get a little bit more deep dive into it. But it continues to be really well done. And just, it's a great snapshot of the time too, to see how, social media explosion. I mean, it was obviously already exploding to an extent, but 2013 was a time that was just different now. Like something we completely understand and accept and just understand as part of social media being integrated into our lives wasn't as prevalent in 2013 or was building. And so just to see that snapshot in time is really fascinating. And it continues to be pretty well done because it's, how are you showcasing, how are you grabbing power/fame without any merit? I don't know if that's the right way to say it, but how you can attain that without necessarily having anything specific to show for it. There could be this perceived fame, and that it's a very an LA thing as well, but it's really interesting how they show it. The most recent episode, and not really spoilers or anything, this is also based on facts, so
it's hard to spoil history. I get it. It's like don't tell me who won in Saving Private Ryan. I don't want to hear about it. No time.
Exactly.
I haven't finished the D-Day scene yet. Don't tell me what happened.
It's a real, you'll be surprised. No, you won't. But what's interesting too is they've delved into, so Doc Rivers, who's the coach in the show in 2013 of the Clippers, played for the Clippers in the early 90s during the time of the LA riots and the Rodney King, I guess riots, trial, all that.
Well, the Rodney, in my mind, it would be the Rodney King beating that led to the LA riots.
Correct.
Is the turn of,
And so they do kind of flashback to Doc at his time there. Doc is also married to a white woman, so there is that kind of back and forth that they explore in terms of how much he understands, how much he is put on him to make a stand, make a statement as a black man versus what's going on in LA versus playing for the Clippers, all this other thing. So it was interesting to see the parallels there that he was facing in 91, 92, then going ahead to 2013 to see how to phrase it, another
do they
racist underemployed.
I'm pivoting this topic slightly just because I want to know something production wise. Do they de-age Lawrence Fishburne, or do they get somebody else to play
different
young?
Guy entirely? So
okay,
yeah.
I would really feel like any powerful moment would have been really undercut by uncanny valuing Lawrence Fishburne to look like a younger version.
It wouldn't have worked. No, they found a guy that just looked like a younger version ish of him, and it worked fine. So
in my mind, I had this terrible fear that they just took footage from Nightmare on Elm Street 3 in like 1985 and were like, this will be fine. Let's manipulate this. This will be okay. Let's do it. That was his first movie role, by the way. Where he was
him from Higher Learning or something, or
incidentally, he was billed as Larry Fishburne in Nightmare on Elm Street 3. He hadn't quite gotten the professionalism yet.
So I continue to watch that. It continues to be excellent. I think my previous assessment that the storytelling is a lot like the American Crime Story shows, the limited series. It seems to be very much the same thing, where it's not just focusing on the basketball. It's not just focusing on one thing. It's giving you very much almost too intimate details of it, where you're really inside behind the curtain to really see what's going on. It's really
again, one of those things I know I'm going to love, and I just need to find the time. And by find the time, it's just I have time to watch things, and I've just chosen not to watch that yet for the time that I have. So
And
because
it
I'm a
might be
monster
something that might be worth just waiting, honestly, and then just
and
blow through the
binge
whole thing. Like, it might be cool to watch that
which
just back
is
to back to back to back.
frankly how I discovered both seasons of Winning Time. I didn't watch either one of those seasons as they
Yep.
were airing. I found the seasons after and just destroyed them in a single sitting, pretty much.
Yep.
Did you watch any of the new season of The Boys yet?
No, that's one I still got to catch up on. That's one of the unwritten rules with my wife is that there's certain shows I can't watch on my own. So,
and this is one of those shows that, despite being this format in this podcast, I will take a kindness and a courtesy on you and not spoil the first 3 episodes. At this time, at a certain point, I would like to talk about the show on the air with you. I will say, though, that I enjoyed the first 3 episodes. I do feel, I don't know if you've seen any of the scuttlebutt online. I've seen a lot of discourse and things in a lot of online reviews in a lot of places that the series, like videos like, has it lost a step? What's going on with this season? And they have announced that the 5th season's the last. I think there is a fear, and I kind of feel it through the first 3 episodes. At time of recording, they've released 4. I have not seen the 4th one yet, but I watched the first 3. There is definitely a feeling of they're moving a lot into place. Through the first 3 episodes, which I found enjoyable, there was definitely a sense of table setting, though. And I'm just not sure if that's table setting for the rest of this season or the fear that it's a table setting season for the final season to come. Which, if we only have another season and a half, and these seasons are not long episodes, aren't long seasons, do I want a table setting season to burn through on The Boys? That said, I enjoyed the first 3 episodes. I can feel where people would be saying, well, let's get more, let's make something happen. It's maybe not as slam bang. I feel like in every other season premiere, there's something that like completely changes the status quo of the show for the season. You know what I mean? Like, oh my God, here we go. That didn't happen this season. This is what I would say. I feel like it is fallout from last season and a slow build that is building now. And maybe that's why people are upset. But that's all I'll get into without completely spoiling it for you. At a certain point, hopefully you catch up and we're able to get into this. So the other thing I watched this week, I watched the first 3 episodes of what I think is a 5-episode miniseries on Vice, Who Killed WCW? And it's interesting because it's not new information for me. I was going in with more of the perspective of how are they going to present the downfall of this wrestling company, because there was a WWE-backed documentary several years ago after the launch of the WWE Network called The Monday Night Wars, which was very, as entertaining as it was, and it was narrated by Keith David, and I always love Keith David, great voice. There is something about it, though, where it was definitely the history is written by the victors documentary.
Yeah.
Like, I was like, oh, okay, I'm not feeling this. This one I was more excited for because they got Brad Siegel, who was the Turner executive, who famously hated WCW, to talk about it on air. They got a lot of the WWE, WCW talent to talk about it on air. They got Eric Bischoff. They got Vince Russo, who are key creative people behind the scenes. They got the guy who do Dark Side of the Ring to be 2 of the producers. And Dark Side of the Ring is absolutely fantastic. On the flip side, the other executive producer is The Rock. And The Rock had nothing to do with WCW. It's famously a WWE guy. He claims that it's because he respects the business and the history and all this. And I will tell you that the most annoying part of the show is The Rock, who never worked a goddamn day in WCW, constantly is showing up as a talking head to like represent the WWE perspective. And I'm like, he lost me immediately because in the first episode, which details like 1996, he had just debuted as like a jobber who people hated.
Right.
And it was like nobody gives a fuck what you think in 1996, Rock. Because he was like, I was watching their program and I thought, this is the shit we should be doing. I was like, sure you did, Rock. Fuck off. I know where you were in 1996. Fuck you. So it was just one of those things where it's been fine, and it's not quite the WWE hit piece that earlier thing was. But what if you really wanted to dive into the Who Killed WCW goodness, like for realsies, they actually interview this guy as a talking head on the show. I believe his name is Guy Evans. So when I say Guy, I meant Guy, but then his name is Guy. His name is Guy Evans, and he wrote a book called Nitro. And he interviewed over the course of several years wrestlers, executives, journalists, and he's the only one who has written a Death of WCW style book. Because there's another really famous book called The Death of WCW, written by some wrestling dirt sheet authors, which is a fun book, but there's not a lot of verifiable sources in that book, and it takes some turns. This one is as detailed, as nuanced as you could want, just deep diving into the utter collapse of this company. And I was telling my friend Alex about this book, and I was like, he's not a wrestling fan, but he's a fan of business. And I was like, this is where this book would still hook you, is it wasn't just a creative decision that killed this company. It was bad business decision after bad business decision after bad business decision. And I'm listening to the audiobook now of this Nitro. It's an 18-hour long unabridged listen.
Jeez.
And it's fascinating, just the missteps and the mismanagement. They got, basically what it says to me is they got lucky, right, in the 90s. 96, 97, for the uninitiated, World Championship Wrestling is the only company that for any point ever in its history has briefly overtaken WWE, Vince McMahon's company, in the ratings. There was about a 1.5 year period where they were the winners, and Vince was on the outs, and everyone was like, my God, it's happening. That was in 1997. They were winning that ratings war. In 2001, they were out of business as a company and purchased by WWE. And in that 5-year span, how did they go from being the hottest thing in the world to out of business and owned by their competition? And it's, people will point to creative decisions, but more often than not, it was business decisions. Bad business decision after bad business decision. It's fascinating.
And wasn't it like, basically that was almost extended, and that's crazy that they go, like you said, out of business over the course of like 4 years. Wasn't that given basically like a 1.5 year reprieve just because they fell into Goldberg?
Yeah, pretty much. So they were on the downwards. So I'm trying to do this without getting into the creative that will probably bore a lot of people.
Okay.
Without hitting a lot of the storylines. Try to stay on the focus of what happened in real life. Mid-1996, the NWO begins. And they ride that to the Starrcade 97 main event, which I believe Goldberg had debuted at that point, but he's still early, low, mid-card. The draw of that is Sting versus bad guy Hollywood Hulk Hogan at that point. That is, Starrcade 1997 is the biggest pay-per-view they will ever have after what was, to be fair, a masterful build in their storylines. But the cracks were showing because there were a lot of drawn-out stories that seemed like they should be ending and weren't. And then people were fine with it because they were getting to this point. Everyone knew Starrcade 97 was the moment. They fucked it up. The thing that people were willing to let so many things slide, because it's like in wrestling, it's WrestleMania season. You know you're building to the climax of like the season finale, the storyline, right? When they take the season finale or the series finale, depending, in a sitcom or a drama, you're angry, right? You're like, so what the fuck was that? I waited all season for that. I watched all these shows for that. Starrcade was WCW's WrestleMania. And so they tanked the finish of the main event. And everyone was like, what the fuck is happening? And that's not what made everyone turn immediately. They were doing great numbers for a long time after that. But it started the downward slide. And then, but as that downward slide happened, Goldberg raised up. And that got them through one more year, where in December 98, Starrcade 98, they fucked up the finish again for the second year in a row, this time with Goldberg on top. And then a 1.5 years later, they were out of business. So, or 2.5 years later, they were out of business. So it's just a fascinating thing. And the book that I'm listening to now, like I said, 18 hours unabridged, and I got to it because I'm still watching the show, dives into so much detail about just the backstage and how everyone's trying to protect their spot. And the biggest business mistake they made is they gave, I think personally that they talk about, is they gave every one of their top wrestlers a favored nations deal. meaning that if somebody came in who got paid more, every one of those people got bumped up to the same pay level. I pump this show and the book and all these things about it, not as wrestling content, it's as business content. If you're fascinated by that kind of thing, it's business content. The only other thing I haven't watched yet is the season finale of Doctor Who, but you don't care about that anyway, so I'm not going to even bother right now. So
it's a recurring thing now. You're like, I was watching Doctor Who and you don't care.
Yeah, I just, I want to talk about it, but, I just see your eyes glaze over and everything's fine. We're okay. It's all right. Whenever you bring up actual sports, that happens for me too.
Teaser.
Somehow, yeah. Well, I was going to say, somehow, unless you have something else you want to talk about that you watched this week, we can pivot into what is a fucking sports-laden show today. I actually had the
I was going to say, your pitch, not...
I had the initial topic idea, and you tried to double down, and you kind of did, with even more sports-heavy topics. Randy loves sports. Big sports guy. Cool guy Randy with his cool guy sports and his cool guy music. But the topic I got into thinking about, what are the best guest spots from a sports star in television? Not cameos in film, because as soon as I brought this up, people are like, Ace Ventura, Dan Marino. And I was like, yeah, but that's not a cameo, or that's not like a guest spot. That's a co-starring role. And then I also immediately disqualified Saturday Night Live and The Simpsons, because they've both been on forever and have had so many athletes doing so many things in so many iconic spots that they both could get their own lists. Who were the best athletes on SNL? Who were the best athlete guest spots on The Simpsons? And by the way, people who didn't read, I put this out on social media asking for feedback. A few people who didn't read the post clearly all immediately answered Homer at the Bat from The Simpsons with all the baseball players, which, yes, is probably the greatest sports guest starring spot of all time, but they have had so many other athletes that I disqualified The Simpsons from this conversation. So Randy and I talked, instead of what we often do where we ping pong, well, I thought this, this, I was like, between the two of us, before we record, let's figure out like 5 entries that we think together are the way to go. And these 5 entries are not ranked. This is in no particular order in my mind, unless, Randy, you've worked out a ranking in your mind.
Not at all.
Okay. There's a few that people suggested that are absolutely on this list. There's one that no one suggested that I insist be on it that we'll start with. But that's because it's the genesis of the topic for me. I thought of this topic because of these episodes, because honestly, I think because we've been talking Winning Time and Clipped and the NBA and all these things, and it led me to thinking about the episodes of Cheers where Kevin McHale was on, who was playing for the Celtics at the time in the late 80s, early 90s. Like, not just the Celtics, like the fucking Celtics, the era of the Celtics, when they were the winners between them and the Lakers. To the fact that he was making 2 guest starring appearances at what the time was the biggest show on TV with the biggest team in sports, them or the Lakers, but you know what I mean, like that tippy top. It made sense. A show that takes place in Boston, it would logically make sense, especially with the bar being owned by what in theory was, even if it was low-level celebrity, a former Boston athlete. These worlds would cross over and correlate. And you have 2 episodes. You have, the first one is one of the Gary's Old Town Tavern episodes. For the uninitiated there, I believe there's 7 of them across the 11 seasons. I could double check, where Cheers faces their crosstown bar rival, Gary's Old Town Tavern, in some kind of contest. Incidentally, there are only 2 episodes in all of these where Cheers won, and this is one of them. And even then, they kind of got swindled at the end, but they technically won the game that was being played. There's a basketball game that they're going to do a pickup game between the staff of Cheers and the staff of Gary's Old Town Tavern. And Sam Malone brings in a ringer, Kevin McHale, as a new bartender to play. He lies to Kevin and says it's a charity game. Turns out, and then Kevin eventually figures it out in classic sitcom fashion that's not a charity game. But it's just fun to see this fucking, and he's not a terrible actor. He's really not in this episode. He's like all athlete actors, some are better than others, but it's not terrible.
He plays it pretty understated, so he doesn't appear to be out of his element. Like, I mean, the writing helps that it just kind of put him into situations where he doesn't have to worry too much about it, but he doesn't feel completely out of place in that scenario as you're watching.
Right. I think little jokes that I love in this are, my favorite interaction is that Sam tried to get Larry Bird, but you couldn't get Larry Bird because, in real life, he's fucking Larry Bird. The second, and I have a feeling that late 80s, early 90s, Larry Bird was not yet in a spot to have fun with his image. You know what I mean? He was probably getting a little pissier at that point, I feel like. I could be wrong. That's just a guess. But
I just, weirdly, that he was in Blue Chips, 4 years after this episode. So that's just the movie. So now a movie might be a little different.
Right.
So, but.
Well, doesn't that movie take place in Indiana? That's one of those ones, right?
He's visiting him essentially at his home in Indiana to go see this prospect. Yeah.
Yep. But the great joke is that, so Woody Boyd, played by Woody Harrelson, the dim-witted idiot bartender from Hanover, Indiana, fake Indiana town, where everyone's an idiot. It's like
not,
Rose
not
on the
fake,
Golden.
not fake town.
Oh, it's not fake?
No, I think
that
actually.
Town...
So it's at least
God.
That's the name of isn't it the college where Woody went to school? Like Woody Harrelson went to school?
I thought it was fake because they make fun of that town like how they make fun of the town that Rose is from on Golden Girls, which is definitely fake because of how fucking stupid everybody is. They
I think it's based off of it's based off of Woody's actual, like Woody Harrelson's actual history.
Destroy Hanover, Indiana in Cheers for like 6 fucking seasons. They make everyone out to be the stupidest fucking people on the planet. I thought it was a fake town. No one would do that to a real city on a nationally beloved sitcom. Holy shit. Wow, that is Hanover. I would like to first apologize on behalf of the Way to These Guys Friends podcast for anyone maybe listening in Hanover, Indiana. And then, possibly years late, because I don't see this stuff happening in real life, I'd like to apologize from the producers, staff, and cast of Cheers, who destroyed you for years on end. That said, there was a great joke in this one that Larry Bird isn't invited because everyone from Hanover hates anyone from French Lick, and anyone from French Lick hates anyone from Hanover. So Woody could not be on the same team with Larry Bird. And
that's
then
funny.
When Kevin McHale comes in later, he goes, they say, they obliquely reference Hanover, not saying that Woody's there. And Kevin's like, oh my God, Larry talks about Hanover. Those guys are idiots. I know a bunch of Hanover jokes. Let me tell some people, hey, how many idiots from Hanover does it take to change a light bulb? And he's like, and I forget the answer, but then Woody, who still doesn't say he's from Hanover, is like, I heard a little bit differently than that. It's fine. And then he just walks away. It's like, God, late 80s, pre-movie Woody Harrelson is just so different to watch. He's so clean cut on Cheers. He's so clean cut and young and like, he's so happy and good in real life now. He's just such a chill dude, but he's cherubic on Cheers. He's got baby face. It's bizarre to watch, but yeah.
That episode, I think about a year and a half before White Men Can't Jump came out. So we start to see Woody actually having some basketball skills in that episode. And I was listening to an interview with Ted Danson and Woody Harrelson most recently. I think he was on Conan's podcast, actually.
Well, also, they were pimping the fact that those two just started their own podcast together. So, please don't turn this one off yet.
But Ted Danson was talking about how when Woody came on to Cheers to replace Coach because the actor passed away, Woody was probably, I think, 24, 25 years old, and all the rest of them in their probably mid to late 30s. And Ted Danson was kind of like, oh, we're going to show this kid what's going on. So it started with like them playing him in basketball when they weren't shooting, and Woody destroyed them. And
That's
then
awesome.
John Ratzenberger, who is, I guess, a pretty stout kind of strong guy they were doing like leg wrestling, and
listen, there's a
Woody
reason he
destroyed
played the
him.
Mack truck in Cars. Okay, he's
Yeah,
Mack
yeah.
in Cars. That's why it's a real life representation. I'm sorry,
But Woody beat him at that, and then it was something else, and so over and over they were finally like, all right, enough of our quote unquote hazing. Woody's just kicking the shit out of us with everything. It's pretty funny, but
that's great. So the other episode that Kevin McHale was in, which is, I like this one more because I
remembered that one way more than the other one that you just brought up. I had to go back and watch the actual game one.
This is his second appearance, and I like it more because it's more. I actually never really liked the Old Town Tavern episodes all that much because I think it's actually because you love the Cheers gang and they always lose in those episodes. I don't know why. Whatever it was, they decided it was funny for them to always be losers and be made fun of and get the best of.
I mean, that's kind of the concept, right? They're a bunch of lovable losers, right?
I know, but I guess in this, I think it's more fun because Kevin McHale is brought down to their level. As Carla says in this episode, as there's a scene, you can find it on YouTube, but I haven't watched the whole episode. I rewatched it before this. It's so great. Is Kevin swings by the bar. There's some excuse to get him there, like Ted. Sam's doing something with him.
He gives Norm the jersey or the coat, right?
Yeah, that's what it is.
Birthday, yeah.
Yes, that's right. He comes by to give him the coat. And then, Cliff and Norm start talking about, and I've never counted, that's because there's this many bolts in the floor at the Boston Garden. And then Kevin's like, I didn't realize that. There's bolts in the floor? I've never even looked. And they start going back and forth. And then my favorite moment is when Carla just grabs him and goes, get out of here. Now. He's like, what? He's like, no, they will suck you in and you will never leave. And then the best line, he goes, I used to know this guy. He used to be a respected psychiatrist. Now all he does is sit around all day with these people and drink beer. And Frasier's not even in that scene. He's just like, go, get out of here. And I love that. And then he comes right back in and gets sucked into it, and it starts ruining his play, and he trips and he hurts because he's counting the bolts. It's a very classic Cheers episode. And it's one of the rare ones where they leave the bar, but it's warranted within the episode because they rarely leave the bar. I mean, they often leave the bar, but they come back and talk about what they did outside the bar. That was the whole concept of the show. And there's laughs where they often describe the things we didn't see.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But I guess when you have Kevin McHale and the Celtics are letting you come shoot in the Garden in that era, you take advantage of it, right? But I just think those are really fun episodes. It's just good classic late 80s, early 90s sitcoms, episodic TV. You can put it on, great background noise. I've talked about my love of Cheers before on here. 11 seasons and just bangers all around. Yeah, with the era of TV, there are lesser episodes in those seasons because there's a lot of filler from time to time. But boy, there's a lot less filler in 11, 26 episode seasons as you would think on that show. That's how good it is.
Well, and you can argue that the Television Academy the Emmys get into sort of we're going to stick with this show and nominate it, a whole bunch of stuff. But I mean, you can stand by Cheers' nominations is insane and wins. It's just, I think they even did that. They did some sort of graphic on the final episode. Like there was a lead up. I think Bob Costas was breaking down the stats.
I remember that.
Something like that. Yeah. And it's, it stands up and you can still, that's the coolest thing about it is that even though there are referential things to the mid to late 80s within it, boy, the jokes are just hammers. I mean, it's always funny.
Much like we talk about with The Simpsons, is when they're not addressing pop culture, it's a timeless show. When it's just and unfortunately, it's one of those. There is maybe to a modern audience the fact that a lot of their arguments would be settled with a Google search on a phone immediately. You have to set that aside, but if you can set that aside, absolutely fantastic. And I love talking about the history. The way that show built is because they got something with that show that you can't do in the modern era, or that you could do, but people refuse to do.
Yeah.
They were the lowest rated show on television in their first season. And they got another season and enough seasons to become the highest rated show on television with growth in their last couple seasons. Could you imagine any network today, in today's culture, renewing the lowest rated show on TV and saying, let's just stick with it and see what happens. I can't process that ever happening again.
Yeah, unless there was a cult following-ish, they won, out of nowhere won 5 Emmys or something like that. And then they were like,
isn't that kind of what happened with Arrested Development? And
yeah.
They still got canceled, though? But
That's
still got canceled. Yeah. Yeah. So, and that was years before now. And so.
That's true.
Anyway, moving on. Let's talk about one of the ones I haven't seen that you wanted to discuss. I did watch the clips on YouTube, but I've never watched Curb Your Enthusiasm.
Okay.
And the first reference you said was Shaq on Curb. And on social media, that's one of the ones that came through several times, was Shaq on Curb. My gut reaction, and I want you to, and I watched the clips, and admittedly not being a Curb fan, not maybe knowing the era as well, I watched it, and my response to you is that felt underwhelming. But I'm clearly in the minority here because a lot of people said that's got to be on the list. Talk about it. Tell me all about it.
So I think, too, it's important to, and we, just like it was a big deal that Kevin McHale from the mid to late 80s Celtics teams, you mentioned how big a Celtics team that was, to have him on a Boston show. I think, Curb takes place in LA, is LA, like very much showcases that part of it. And it's the kind of celebrity culture, like he's able to get these courtside tickets it's him and Richard Lewis who get courtside tickets to the Lakers, and Larry just stretches out because Larry does things sometimes and because it's Larry, ends up tripping Shaquille O'Neal, who gets hurt on the play. He's going to be out for 2 months, possibly costing Lakers the season, all this stuff. And then, of course, Larry is just, because everyone saw it on TV, everyone is just giving Larry the business all over the place. Larry finds out that Shaq is a huge Seinfeld fan, and so he goes and visits him in the hospital. And this is the other kind of weird scene with Shaq. So, because the part where he's playing basketball is pretty brief, actually. It's just that's the whole premise of it. He trips him and he falls down and he gets hurt. But they're playing categories in the hospital room. It's Shaq, his girlfriend, and the Lakers team doctor. And the big revelation of all this, because Shaq is originally not willing to accept the apology, but then he says his favorite episode is the contest you have, because what Larry did, he found out that he's a big Seinfeld fan, so he brings him all these tapes of Seinfeld episodes so he can watch it while he's in the hospital. And he's like, well, I love the contest. Can you put the contest on? And the doctor leaves the room to go to the bathroom, and that's when Larry takes a peek at his thing and realizes that he's been cheating at categories.
The doctor has.
The doctor. This is the Lakers doctor, by the way. So, it's that's
who, by
in
the
there
way,
with him.
In the clips is played by, I believe it was Scully from Brooklyn Nine-Nine.
From
right?
Brooklyn Nine-Nine, yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so Shaq fires the doctor, and then they all watch the contest. It's just it's a very goofy thing, but it's very much in line with everything that always happens in Curb. That there are 2 or 3 things, and you could kind of tell that they just go with whatever. Curb famously enters each scene primarily with just an idea, and then almost 90% of the dialogue is improvised, and they just kind of go with it from within the scene. So I think it's fairly memorable because it's combination, huge star at the time. The Lakers were I think a 3-peat champion at the time. They had won 3 in a row, and Shaq on top of the world. He'd been the MVP either that year or the year before in the NBA, so he's all over. He's the biggest player in the NBA. He's playing for the Lakers. He's in, he's very Hollywood, all this other stuff. And then so he gets on Curb, and then it's kind of a nothing scene, but that's kind of the idea of Curb. So to weave that in there was a big deal at the time.
I would like to note, to Shaq's credit too, is Shaq is famously kind of a terrible actor. You've seen Steel, you've seen Kazam. I hope you've seen them so that we share pain. So they're terrible movies. He's a bad actor, and in this, he's not bad. And I feel like that's because of the framework of how they do the show. He's just talking. He's reacting and talking to what they do. And that helps his performance. He comes across way more natural on this than he did in any other movie or fake show performance that he's ever had. And it's good. I found it underwhelming, but I think it's because I don't watch Curb and I don't care about the Lakers. So to me, I was like, what is this? And meanwhile, everyone else was like, this is all time. And I was like, oh, my bad.
And I think Shaq is naturally charismatic. So I think when he just adheres to who he is as opposed to trying to become something larger than that, it works a lot better when he, again, I said that McHale was kind of understated in his performance. By Shaq doing the same thing, it works a lot better.
Yeah. Also, I love that we accidentally went, because I didn't plan it this way, Celtics to Lakers, with keeping that alive, you know? I know sports. Who says I don't?
You famously, but
yeah, I really don't. But please don't make me talk about actual sports. That would be a fucking terrible idea. So I will leave it up to you then here. Do you want to stay within the Seinfeld sphere, or do you want to pivot to, do you want to stay in NBA? Do you want to stay in the Seinfeld sphere, or do you want to just pivot elsewhere entirely?
That's the thing. I mean, we could go back to Boston with one. We could go, we could go Seinfeld, or
let's
go basketball.
Let's talk Seinfeld, and because we're kind of in that world.
Sure.
And this one is maybe a cheat, what we're calling this entry, because in my mind, I remember the episode. A lot of people, several people suggested the episode "The Boyfriend" with Keith Hernandez on Seinfeld, but I really so clearly remember all the Yankees episodes when George was working for the Yankees, where they actually got people like Jeter to come on and be on the show. So to me, this entry is more New York sports. Seinfeld had a lot of ties to New York sports and talked about New York sports and got New York sports stars to be on the show.
Yep.
So, and it's interesting because I really do enjoy Seinfeld, and I enjoyed the show Seinfeld as much as I currently can't stand the man Jerry Seinfeld in his modern day incarnation.
Yeah.
Like, shut the fuck up. You're ruining your legacy by us seeing who you really are. Please stop. Just stop.
Showcasing how outdated your thought process is with pretty much everything.
Really, and without pivoting too much, coming off of Curb, who just had an amazing finale by all accounts. Again, I don't watch, but I've heard nothing but universal praise.
It never wavers. I guess that's the best testament to it. All 10 seasons have the same level of very, very high quality.
And that's 10 seasons over 20 plus years, right? Yeah. With the gaps. And
it might be 11
and,
actually, whatever it is. So,
yeah. But still, and that's Larry keeping up with the times and staying part of the zeitgeist and knowing what pop culture is. Meanwhile, Jerry dated a 17-year-old and is obscure as fuck and makes outdated, like, Seinfeld's a great show, but you can see, I feel like even more than it did, Larry David should be getting a lot more credit for that than we even knew at the time. Yeah. So,
or some of the other writers that are well known for the multitude of things they've done.
Well said. Back to the actual topic at hand. If you wanted to break down the Keith Hernandez episode a bit and talk about why it worked and why you love it, I'll hit some of the other ones.
So I think, and this is going to be a recurring theme, I think, with these Seinfeld episodes, and which speaks brilliantly to Seinfeld being about nothing or being about something so inconsequential that that the other parts that should be a lot bigger don't seem bigger. And the Keith Hernandez one, that's the one with the loogie that moves, right? Like the magic bullet loogie.
Yep.
And that reenactment, like, just, breaking down essentially the JFK courtroom scene, but doing it and just
with Wayne Knight in the same role and position that he was at JFK.
The reenactment, just a nice game, pretty boy. It just like it. So the fact that Keith Hernandez is it now, that's not the same episode where they talk about Keith Hernandez mode, right? Is Keith Hernandez in more than one Seinfeld episode?
No, he's only in this episode. Okay. It's got to be the same thing, right? Because, and just to say that we didn't hit the plot, basically, the reason it's called The Boyfriend is because Jerry and Keith Hernandez become very good friends. And it's much like, and especially in the early 90s, when this is more awkward, male friendship is confusing it's kind of funny talking about how Jerry Seinfeld hasn't moved on or how Jerry Seinfeld seems out of touch. The whole concept of this is the concept of male friendship kind of, and you know what I mean in that regard.
But I mean, Keith Hernandez, notably, he was actually an MVP in St. Louis before he came to the Mets, and then I think he was on the World Series team that won in the mid '80s, and so. But it's known more. I think that episode way known more for the magic bullet
Agreed.
than Keith Hernandez specifically, even though he's integral to that whole scene, that whole part of it. And it's interesting how that becomes part of it. And as you talk about the other ones, the ones with all the Yankees, it's very similar stuff where I would say it's not the contest, the one where George that stops having sex and then becomes sort of this genius.
You stole it. That's actually my favorite. That's the one I wanted to talk about the most. That's my favorite of these batch of episodes.
Please, then
because
take it from there.
There's the moment where I don't know sports well enough to know the other person, but there's Derek Jeter and another player.
Bernie Williams is his name.
Okay.
So.
Was he any good? Is he famous?
Not a Hall of Famer, famous Yankee. Always seemed to be that guy that he was like, I would say maybe not fringe Hall of Famer. He's probably a Yankee Hall of Famer, but always had a big hit or made a big play for the Yankees when they were winning all those World Series.
What I love about it is that I'm always a sucker for a Flowers for Algernon tale. You know, Flowers for Algernon?
Yeah,
if I'm dropping that reference. It's, somebody gets really smart and then they do something and they wind up losing all of those smarts, but they kind of have the memories of being smart.
Yep.
And that's George when he's not having sex. He becomes a super genius. When George isn't focused on sex, when he's unable to have sex. And also, by the way, I just realized I didn't plan it this way. The fact that my ace ass is like, this is my favorite episode. I'm a fucking cliche. What happened to me? I feel like an idiot right now. So I do lean into your own stereotypes, kids. Fucking ridiculous. So anyway, but there's that scene. My favorite scene is when, Jeter, Derek fucking Jeter. Even I know Derek Jeter is out there and he's trying to like work on his swing and doing hit. And George just steps out and it's like the scene with the scarecrow in fucking Wizard of Oz. And he's like, hitting's not about muscle, simple physics. Calculate the velocity V in relation to trajectory T with G and gravity. Of course, remains a constant. And he's just going and his dinger after dinger. And then one of them just responds to him, are you the guy that put us in that Ramada in Milwaukee? And it's just like, oh man, it's so good.
Oh,
because George is also bad at his actual job, which was always entertaining.
I would say of the options, those are I think the Keith Hernandez might be the most famous one, but I would say that's my favorite as well of all the introductions from all the players and stuff. With the other one being, and if you can certainly talk about it if you want, when George wants to bring cotton uniforms.
That's the other one. That's the other big one.
Danny Tartable is the main guy who was a Yankee, a noted Yankee. People would have known him. I
wouldn't have known who it is at all. I just know he was I knew he was a real player, but yeah. And then,
I think they even reference it when they're watching the game. They even say Danny Tartable has split his pants or whatever. So it's the callback on not only him being in the.
George insists that the uniforms be switched to cotton because they're more free-flowing and they're comfortable in this, but then the uniforms shrink because they're being washed and they're all cotton and everyone goes out to play the game and they start ripping and tearing and it's just not going well. It's just fun. It's just silly.
George.
I'm not going to count this as real sports, but then we would be remiss, of course, if we didn't say that fake George Steinbrenner, played by Larry David, is a recurring character through, I think, 2 seasons of the show, or is it just 1? I always forget how long George actually worked for the Yankees in that show. In fact, we're going to pause because now I want to know. How many seasons did George actually work for the Yankees? Do you have a guess on the outset?
I'm going to guess 3. But
3? Okay. Because I remember the episode that's the Summer of George where he got canned, but he got all the money. So he's going to do an amazing thing. You fucking win. I'm going to give it to you by the law. It's really kind of 2.5, but I'm going to give you the whole. He worked for the Yankees from the end of season 5 until the middle of season 8. So I'll give you the 3. How about that?
Longer than I would have thought.
That's
Although
the longest job.
So.
That's the longest job he had on that show, right? Like by far.
Oh yeah, because he was unemployed for
most of the
several stretches, right?
Yeah. Well, there's 2 more.
Yep.
We can stick for the moment with baseball, and we'll hit an episode of a show where I'm very in and out on the show. And I don't mean in and out or up and down. I'm like, I don't like it and I like it. I just haven't watched the show as I watch the show. I catch episodes on FX, or I watch things that people say, you'd enjoy this. everything I've seen from it, I think I dig, and I've seen this episode, and I think this episode's hilarious. It's the gang beats Boggs from It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. It's Randy, did you know about this drinking contest? And we'll hit the episode synopsis before this episode. Is this a famous thing?
I would say noted enough. I mean, wouldn't call it like famous, but it's Wade Boggs's travel drinking was notorious. Like this was I don't know this specific one, but it like this specific feat was always known, but like it was not a surprise, I guess, that Wade Boggs had imbibed this many beers in one trip.
Okay, so the gist of it is that the gang from Always Sunny is going to take a cross country flight, and their plan is to beat purportedly one of the most famous achievements in sports history. That from coast to coast on that flight, Wade Boggs drank 70 beers, and they say we're going to beat that record. And then the catch is, not only did they drink 70 beers, they have to get off the flight and then go hit, I think it's like go for 3 for 5 at the plate.
Right.
So that's what they have to do. And it's just the episode is, you talk about side plots or fillers of this, and there's kind of a side plot, but it's really just, here's the gang. It's almost like a bottle episode because they're just smashed drunk on a plane, and just gets worse and worse and crazier and crazier. And it's one of the episodes I've seen where it's joke, minute by minute, second by second. It's nothing but comedy, and it's just really good. And the sports comes into it in that Charlie gets so fucked up as he's closing in on that, he hallucinates Wade Boggs, who he calls the ghost of Wade Boggs, because there's a recurring joke that Charlie thinks Wade Boggs is dead. Right. And people keep correcting him that no, Wade Boggs is a man in his 50s. He is very much alive. And the other recurring gag, I love that, is that Dee doesn't know who Wade Boggs is and keeps thinking he's Boss Hogg from the Dukes of Hazzard. Right. So she hallucinates Boss Hogg. Great fucking good episode.
Yep.
It really doesn't have, we talk about some of these have more to do with sports. This had nothing to do with sports. But the fact that Wade Boggs came in and did this one scene, and he just pokes fun of themselves, crushes it, is absolutely stellar in it. Absolutely amazing.
And I think you said 3 for 5. I think it was 3 of 10. I think it was
okay.
Because
I don't know. Sports.
Well, the reason being Wade Boggs was a great hitter in real life in baseball for his career, and if you're a 3 out of 10 hitter in baseball, you're considered to be very, very good. Wade Boggs' average was above 300, so I think that's where they came in. So, and I think it ends with,
you are right, by the way. Googling it is 3 for 10.
They find a baseball diamond, and I think there's only one. I think like Charlie somehow hits a rope on the one pitch that's thrown to, and then Dennis is just kind of like, I'm out of baseballs. You batted 1,000. You win. And they go get another beer before they get on their flight. It's like,
yes, they just catch the flight right back home. You're 100% correct. And I also would know, we were talking beforehand, and we had mentioned not including The Simpsons. Wade Boggs famously in that Simpsons episode. And then finally pivoting back to basketball. This was the other one on social media that a lot of people suggested, who actually, by the way, I didn't realize this until I was Googling. He made 3 appearances on this show. Detlef Schrempf made 3 appearances on Parks and Recreation, but everyone who is anyone is thinking about it because of the Entertainment 720 appearance, I think.
Of course.
And that's not his first appearance. He's in season 2, where they're going to bring him in as a guest star for the telethon. And I believe, which is where also, no, that's not where Little Sebastian. No, that is where Little Sebastian makes his first appearance, because they get him for the telethon. And then the next episode he appears in is the episode Little Sebastian, where it's the memorial and Tom forms his company. And that's where he's doing all that. Where he's just hired to hang around the office and play basketball. And he's still there in season 4 before the company shuts down. That's his third and final appearance, still at the Entertainment 720 offices, just playing basketball.
It's amazing. Along with Roy Hibbert. So as if a 6, whatever, however, I think Detlef Schrempf was 6'10". Roy Hibbert is like 7'3". So you just have these 2 giant individuals.
And it's funny to me how some of these appearances, can I be honest? I have no idea who Detlef Shrimp is. I had never heard of him before Parks and Rec. As not being a sports person, was he a famous player? Was he very good? Is he a Hall of Famer?
He is not a Hall of Famer. He was a very good player, first for the Seattle Supersonics, and then played for the Pacers for a large part of the end of his career.
Which is why he would tie into
Indiana connection. Yeah. So Roy Hibbert also played for the Pacers, so that's why they had those two players. So
we accidentally hit on quite a lot of Indiana sports in this, by the way. Did not mean to do that. Did not mean to go so deep into Indiana. Bringing a lot of sports guest stars does Indiana.
Yes. Well, Parks and Rec had a few on there too. Andrew Luck from the Colts and Reggie Wayne. Yeah, for when Andy's bachelor party.
The Colts episode, surprisingly, not a single nomination from anybody online. So, is there anything else you want to say about the Detlef Shrimp? Because we're just kind of listing the ones we thought were best. I can hit some other answers that people had given if you wanted to dive into.
Please do, yeah.
So several people mentioned Bill Buckner on Curb, but again, not watching Curb. But I read on it. It sounds pretty funny. He was the one. Was he a Cub or a Red Sox who dropped the pitch? Right?
So he was a Cub originally, and with the Red Sox in 1986, Game 6 of the World Series, they basically had the lead, and the Mets did this crazy comeback to win Game 6. Then they ended up going to win Game 7 and won the World Series, but there was a routine ground ball to first. Bill Buckner, who was in for his defense because he was known for being a pretty good defensive first baseman, the ball goes through his legs. The Mets win the game, and that's it was so infamously. It's the ball gets by Buckner was the infamous call or whatever, and so he catches the baby, and that was like in Curb, and so it was like he redeems himself.
A couple of people suggested, and you had brought up one of these. You had brought up The Rock on that 70s show, to which I countered, if you get to talk about The Rock on that 70s show, I get to talk about The Rock on Star Trek Voyager, and you said, let's not talk about The Rock. That said, I did get one suggestion, not from that 70s show. Somebody did say you could do The Rock from Star Trek Voyager. So I realize that probably is informed by the fact that it's my social media and those are the people who are following me, but I stand by it. So
I was unaware of that one.
And he plays a gladiator in a pit where seven of nine is being forced to fight in like a gladiator arena, and The Rock is one of the people fighting in the arena. So Hulk Hogan on the A-Team in that same vein was a suggestion, which I actually entertained including that one because that was at the height of Mr. T, the height of Hulk Hogan, and that was playing into the WrestleMania 1 main event where both of them hosted Saturday Night Live in that same year. That's a big year for both of them circling each other in that orbit.
There was, do you remember the show Royal Pains? I think it was on USA.
Vaguely.
It was
I'm aware of it. Couldn't tell you anything about it.
Mark Feuerstein was like a doctor that was basically helping out people in the Hamptons, and so and it was him and his brother or something like that.
I remember Mark Feuerstein from our conversation about Must See TV because I felt like we discussed he's one of those people that kept trying to make a thing when they kept giving him shows and they just kept not happening.
I don't know if it just became we just kept watching it, but The Big Show was on an episode of that, or Paul White. It was he basically was playing almost like an actor that was playing a larger than life, not superhero, but kind of type thing. So
okay, I have not watched New Girl. I know there are some people who are obsessed with it and absolutely adored New Girl. A couple people said J.J. Watt on New Girl was a possibility for an entry. Which have you seen that? Detailed for me. I don't know what happened there.
So I don't know the episode specifically. I think probably saw the J.J. Watt episode, but I don't recall the exact specifics of what.
And then I just realized we left off one that I do want to mention because it was, if we talked about 5, and if there were 6, I would include Marshawn Lynch on Brooklyn Nine-Nine.
Yeah.
Which was absolutely stellar. Which is funny because it ties into what some of these are, is that's a nothing appearance. He does nothing, but they used if you recall, that was the post-Super Bowl episode.
Yep.
They got the post-Super Bowl Let's Hype Brooklyn Nine-Nine spot, and they used Marshawn Lynch as like I was going to say the linchpin of promoting that episode. Which I actually think backfired on them because I know that there are a lot of people who tuned in to that post-Super Bowl episode with those commercials who aren't Brooklyn Nine-Nine fans who are like, I saw that was fucking stupid. And I was like, I love that show. Fuck you.
So
Yeah.
I also think, I wonder if that sort of started I think it was Thursday Night Football, would always have Marshawn do something around that area. Like he went
That
out
may
on
have
the
been.
fan boats in New Orleans and stuff like that. And so I wonder if that started from that, or it was a byproduct of doing that. So just that they saw him there and realized that he could be entertaining and do some other things. So maybe a little bit of springboard. I mean,
because that's when Thursday Night Football at the time was still on Fox, right? At that time, because that was a Fox show.
It was never on Fox. So I think
It was
Thursday Night
okay.
Football
So that
was,
would be no then, because in that era, Brooklyn Nine-Nine was still on Fox. It was before it switched to NBC.
right. But I'm just saying that bringing him into understanding that he could be funny or interesting, as opposed to like maybe that springboarded that concept.
Because it was definitely a year Fox
at
had the Super Bowl, obviously, because it was a post-Super Bowl show, but I wasn't sure. Okay,
right.
I got you.
And then who was the biggest fan of him? I can't forget. One of the characters, right?
Rosa Diaz.
Right, yeah.
Rosa was, which was part of the gag because Rosa doesn't like anything. So there you go. But so that's that. And so I had come up with that topic. And as you can probably tell by a lot of this conversation, I don't fucking know sports. I don't know what to talk about when it comes to this. And then Randy was like going deeper on we could do what sports guest stars would you like to have on a thing? And I was like, I don't fucking know, buddy. I got nothing. I'm not trying to be dismissive, but I can't tell you a thing. I have no idea what fake sports things I'd like to have happen. So he's suggesting topics. He does that one. And I was like, I can't give you anything. He's like, fine, we won't do that. He goes, what are your favorite sports movies? And I was like, fine, we'll keep fucking talking about sports. I said with that exact tone in my head. He didn't hear me. We were texting. But I want you to know that the tone in my head was like, fine, let's do a whole fucking episode about sports. I love sports. Next week, we're talking about Star Trek for 2 goddamn hours.
Oh, God.
So, no, we won't do that.
What I was trying to frame this at as well is that sports movies, I mean, it can be, I think it's a subjective thing regardless, because it could be the sports that you like, but it can also be just the movie that you like that it happens to be around sports. So I thought it was a unique way to take on it that we still kind of dovetail off of what we're doing.
You're not wrong. I just laughed that we were dedicating an entire episode to this. I was like, I'm exhausted. I have to edit this. I'm exhausted already talking about this. That
well,
said,
it's the shortest episode, but
yeah, I know, right? But I did try to think of some sports movies on the fly that I love, and as we talked about it before air, there were quite a few that came to mind. But this was your initiation. This is your initial topic. Hit me with. Is this a ranking, or are you just giving me three? Okay.
I think it's just three. So
okay, so hit me with your first one.
Three.
What's the first one you want to talk about?
So I'm gonna start with Major League because I adore that movie. It fits a lot of. I'm a big quotable movie, and that one is incredibly quotable. Great comedic performances, just great characters, lots of fun. Ragtag. A bunch of what did they call that? Ne'er-do-wells.
Ne'er-do-wells.
Yeah.
It's as perfect. You're right, though, by the way. I quote this movie. And everything I just said, I quote this movie. So, anyway.
I mean, and things that aren't related necessarily to baseball. There's some good baseball ones in there. But, I mean, when Charlie Sheen is at the restaurant, a fancy restaurant, and he has his leather vest on and a tie. I look like a banker in this. I mean, there's just a lot of really, and it's pre-insane Charlie Sheen. So, or maybe he was still insane, but we didn't know as much about it. Between Wesley Snipes.
Listen, don't you shit on Tom Berenger. I was about to say, what are you, Corbin Burnson?
Corbin Burnson, the guy that plays Lou Brown, the manager, is awesome, and just the guy, even the very. Oh, God, I mean, you could just keep going over and over. Serrano, Dennis Haysbert. I mean, it's
got a great cast. It really does have a great cast.
Great ensemble cast. You know who the main characters are, but at the same time, and it's a rollicking good time that you can kind of pick up at any point. I think that's what I like the most about it. You can tune in, 40 minutes in, and you're not missing anything. It's either the Indians are still sucking, or they're getting a lot better and are pushing towards the face-off with the Yankees.
It's such a good movie that they just made it exactly again for Major League 2, but recast Wesley Snipes. Probably because he was a bigger star at that point. But literally, one of the most, in my mind, I've seen that movie more times because it used to be on Comedy Central all the time.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Major League 2, though, is the exact same fucking movie. It's one of those bad sequels where they just, they're bad again and we're going to do it again. It's like, oh, that's fucking lame. And especially because of how perfect this movie is.
Usually, weirdly enough, I am usually more forgiving of sequels than a lot of other people are with movies, and I didn't love Major League 2. It's just, I think they even made a third one, which is even worse.
They did. Who is, without Googling it, don't you dare Google it. I knew this without any websites. Who is the only cast member from the first movie to appear in Major League 3? You don't have to give me a character, but you can give me a character. Or if you know
from the original movie?
It's the original movie, who's the only one that shows up in Major League 3. Back to the Minors, starring Scott Bakula.
And what's his name? He plays Jefferson Darcy. Isn't he in it?
And yes, who as we've talked about, I want to do a whole episode about that. Actually, that's our next. I'm not joking. I'm committing. We're doing the what's his nuts deep dive. We're doing his deep dive. Ted McGinley deep dive.
Nice.
And I'm serious. We're doing it. But anyway,
I'm gonna guess that it's Dorn.
Good job. Yeah, it is. It is
like,
Dorn.
What has Corbin Burnson been doing? So it's Corbin Burnson also we'll flip this back in the either first or second episode as an ancillary character in Clipped. So there you go.
Oh, okay, great. Yeah, no, he's had an interesting career. He's one of those ones that's kind of like Eric Roberts, where he has done throughout the years absolutely amazing movies in the same year that he does absolute schlock trash. He will take any job, I feel like. It's crazy. Because I'm pretty sure, like, just to pivot briefly in that example, when I think of Eric Roberts, the same year he was like the gangster in The Dark Knight, he was doing like a Hallmark TV movie. The same year. Yeah. He'll just take anything. It's crazy. But I was looking up for Roger Dorn, Major League Back to the Minors. It is not a big role. He is in like the beginning and the end. He is now the owner of the Twins, who recruits Scott Bakula to be the manager of this minor league team. That's how his role is. It's not good. I saw that movie because I loved Scott Bakula and no other reason. And it's not a good film. But I would say, so that was on my short list for me. I don't know if I'll even pick 3 because of how much that was on my short list.
Yeah, that's fine. They overlap.
I guess I would then go to stick with comedy, and because it isn't my top choices, I got to go Happy Gilmore. It is, to me, and this can be controversial, and it could be an age thing as well, it is the superior golf film to Caddyshack. Because I think Happy Gilmore is so much funnier, so much better, so much more tightly plotted. Caddyshack is a series of people doing coke, doing comedy skits on a golf course.
Yep.
That's what Caddyshack is. And for its era, 1980 when it came out, and listen, it launched so many careers. Yeah. And it is funny with a question mark. It has moments. But maybe because I'm of a different era and because I'm not coped out of my mind, it is so of its time. Honestly, the best part of that movie is Rodney Dangerfield, who had been doing the same shtick since the 70s, but just not on film, and then parlayed that into a film and TV career. The reason he works is because he did the same thing he'd always been doing and the same thing he kept doing. It's just, we had never seen that in film before. We would like to see more of him, please. And that is why Rodney Dangerfield's the best part of that movie.
I forget the line. It's like, what kind of hat you get? This is the kind of hat you get a bowl of soup with. Oh, it looks good on you, though. Like,
yes, exactly.
There's just so many of those. They're just bang, 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 bang.
Rodney Dangerfield's insult comedy one-liners delivery, when he picked a project that worked for him, like Back to School, fucking fantastic. And he couldn't act, but he could be funny as hell. That's what it was.
The back and forth with him and Kennison in that movie. Oh.
Yes. But Happy Gilmore is actually, in my mind, a good movie, a fun movie. And it's the movie pre-Waterboy that just post Billy Madison, pre-Waterboy, that I think is that sweet spot before it just skyrocketed Adam Sandler to fame. Adam Sandler was still niche famous when Happy Gilmore came out. It was, this guy's fucking funny. I like what's going on. Did you see this movie? This movie's great. Then Waterboy catapulted him to mainstream fame. He was still niche famous when this came out. And I think it works better than some of his other ones because of that. Because he's not quite got a formula yet, even though it hits a lot of his early formula. It's just so funny with so many little skits and bits and goes, but with a plot that works.
I think, and one of the great sports movie villains of all time in Shooter McGavin.
McGavin. Yeah, man. My God.
I heard an interview with that actor, and I'm blanking on
Christopher McDonald.
Christopher McDonald, thank you. And he's in Hacks, which I've talked about that I was watching the last couple. And he said before that it's twice a week that someone walks by just like, fuck you, Shooter, or whatever, like just whatever. And he loves it. He thinks it's great. It
immortalized
great
him.
Performance. Yeah.
He was a working actor who had done good stuff. He was always kind of a little schmarmy in that regard, but he was a working actor. He was always getting wrong, but that you knew he'd always get villain roles from then on. He was doing just fine. He was going to always have work at that point.
Yeah.
That said, he is another one, though, where I would do a deep dive on his career because the amount of shit that he's been in, both in television and film, astounding to talk about the work Christopher McDonald has done. Which, by the way, it'll always come back to Star Trek. You're saying you're not going to walk. If I saw him, I would walk up to him and go, fuck you, Lieutenant Richard Castillo. Just to fuck with him because he would think it would be Shooter McGavin.
Who?
No, I disagree because Star Trek nerds always bring shit up. He would bring it up. Also, he strikes me as the type of guy that's probably done a convention or two for some extra cash just because he can. So, I get that vibe that I also get the vibe that he's done so much that he also probably remembers all of it. I can't place why I get that vibe, but I get a vibe that he would remember that weird little role he did from whatever thing in 2000, whatever. I don't know why. I get that vibe from him. What's your next choice?
So I'm going to pivot since we've both done a comedy here. I'll go to drama and we'll stick with Indiana. So I love Hoosiers. Basketball is probably maybe not to watch weirdly enough, but I grew up playing basketball. I played on my high school team. I love basketball. So just to see the game transpire and the way that Norman Dale played was very similar to how my high school coach thought. So it kind of has that a little bit of nostalgia.
Gene Hackman playing the coach.
And it's a great performance from him. It's based on a true story that in the state of Indiana, and I don't know if they just recently did away with it, but no matter the size of the high school, they all get into this statewide tournament. So it's a high school that has 40 people in it can be, in the same tournament as, an enrollment of 2,000. And that's actually what ends up happening is it's not Hickory, but I forget the name of the small town in Indiana.
Hanover. No, I'm just kidding.
No,
it is
that would be crazy if it was Hanover, but
it is Hickory, Indiana. You said it's not Hickory, it's Hickory.
Really? That was the name of the town? Oh, okay.
I'm reading the wiki right now, unless somebody edited it moments ago to fuck with us.
Okay.
So we're because I don't think this is going out live. If someone did that,
then I stand corrected. So, but it's a very well done. It's just a great sports movie. The scenes are all shot really well. They shot it, I believe, at Butler Fieldhouse in Indianapolis, and it's also for it being a mid '80s movie. It has a really good. It feels like 50s basketball and other stuff like that. I love Hoosiers. It was one of those we'd always watch to pump ourselves up to. It's great.
All right, good stuff. Yeah, I've seen this movie. I appreciate Gene Hackman's performance. Listen, it was added to the Library of Congress for being historically, culturally significant. It's fine. I don't care. It's fine. I'm glad it's one of your choices. Good for you.
Fair enough.
I don't know. I don't know. It was fine.
Okay.
I don't know. Maybe, and that's not to say I know I'm on the outs here. I like a good sports drama. I was trying to decide if I was going to pick a drama, do I want to pick, there's 3 football dramas that come to mind.
Okay.
There's Friday Night Lights, not a Friday Night Lights. Or is it Friday Night Lights?
Yeah.
They made. I
Billy
know that
Bob
was a
Thornton,
TV
yeah.
show. That's the one. They made it into a TV show, right? I was worried I got.
Correct.
Is that
Yes.
the one? No,
Which was
that's not
also
the one
good, but the
with.
movie was Billy Bob. Yeah.
I think I'm
West
thinking of
Texas
the
High
wrong
School.
movie.
Are you thinking of Varsity Blues?
No, yeah, I was thinking of Varsity Blues. There's, which I'm
A
not going to
wonderful
put.
guilty pleasure. Yeah.
That's just it. I'm not putting it on.
Yeah.
But I thought of Varsity Blues because I'm of the age where I was of the age when that movie came out. It was huge. I was like 1999 and I was in high school. So
it is a great, not great movie. I'll put it that way.
There it is. And then for genuine emotional, I would go either Remember the Titans or Any Given Sunday.
Yep.
I think because it's one of the rare latter-day performances of Pacino where Pacino isn't terrible, I'm going Any Given Sunday. Everything Pacino has done after Scent of a Woman has to be judged individually because he won the Oscar and just somehow got stuck in Scent of a Woman. He was like, so that's what people like? I have to yell about everything? Got it. Yep. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. He did Heat 2 years later, pretty good. He did Any Given Sunday in 2001, pretty good. He's done a lot of fucking trash, though. He has not maintained his legacy. I mean, he hasn't been De Niro bad, but but I think Any Given Sunday wins. And sentimentally, because I want to give Pacino that W, I'm going to go Any Given Sunday.
Fair enough. One of the great locker room speech scenes, pump up and kind of revolutionary way they shot that too, almost nauseating at times. But also, I don't know, what is Jamie Foxx if not for that movie? Him as Willie Beeman really shot him to the forefront of everyone. I mean, people knew of him, obviously. He had his own show. He'd been on Living Color, But
he was able to become Ray Charles, which, probably because of this moment. So I also would like to note that I'm thinking more Pacino sports movies. I don't know if this counts because it was an HBO movie, but I really liked, what was the
Paterno one?
Was it just called Paterno? The one where he was Paterno?
I think Happy Valley, one of the two. Yeah.
Yeah. I thought he was really good in that.
Mm-hmm.
And it was I thought it came out recently enough to when the scandals actually happened. I always worry when that happens, it could just be, let's hit piece something. Not that you can't hit piece that, it's terrible.
Right.
But you get my meaning of that when it's so connected to something, are the emotions too strong to where this is going to come on just so thick, so heavy. I think he does a really good, came out in 2018, it's an HBO movie. That is one of those, another later era, really nuanced and a understated performance. He's not screaming, which is why it shows he's acting again. And I just really liked him in it because of that. What's your next one?
So, all right, my third and final one. And this is tricky. I went back and forth a lot of ones because I really do. I'm going to say all the ones that I'm not going to pick, but I still like. With Dodgeball and White Men Can't Jump and Blue Chips, and I'd throw The Waterboy in there too. I'd say you mentioned it briefly. But those four. But I think from a sheer cinematic standpoint and the way that they put it all together, Miracle is great. It's so much fun to watch. And they did such a cool thing with the casting that they took hockey players and treated them and taught them how to act, as opposed to getting actors teaching them how to play hockey. So the hockey action on the ice looks legit, and it's very much in game. It was a great idea to focus on Herb Brooks. Kurt Russell is great in it, in that performance. I think the only thing he got nominated for was maybe cinematography or editing, but
no, that was definitely one of those movies that I think was very big with the public, but nobody gave a shit. It wasn't Oscar bait. Maybe they wanted it to be, but it didn't work out that way. I was telling you before we started recording, I saw that movie in the theater. That was a big movie. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and a great movie to see in the theater too, just to see that on a bigger screen. It looks great. The game, the whole scene, I mean, it's like a half-hour scene of the game against the Russians is just unbelievable. They do a great job of recreating some of it and using other audio for other parts of it. So I get pumped up watching that movie just because it was, especially at the time, you think about Nowadays, I mean, we could do all sorts of shoots like that with drone or with, GoPros on people or some sort of capture where you put it on the skaters. But in 2004, to use that kind of cinematography to really showcase the game was really, really cool. So I think Miracle would be my third choice.
I was so fascinated because I remember the guy who played the goalie was also Tag on Friends. And based on what you were saying, I was like, was he a hockey player? He was not. He was
and the reason
doubled.
I take that, because they used a guy named Bill Ranford who was a goalie at the time, and that because it was really easy to do that because you could put a mask on and everything else. It was really hard to body double the other one.
He was one of the easy ones to replace. Yeah, that makes sense.
He was any of his body double stuff. You wouldn't really need to tell anything other than to get the right wig to match the hair in the back of his mask.
That was the one pause. I was like, Tag played fucking hockey? But yeah, I got you. That's all right.
So he would be the one exception. So, but all the other ones that needed to actually skate a whole bunch, they were done. And you could tell it looked very realistic.
Yep.
And yeah, I would say similar to Major League or Hoosiers to an extent, I can turn on Miracle at pretty much any time. And I'm in because I know I'm not waiting that long for something that I'm really interested in.
That's fair. That's good. And also, I like Kurt Russell, as you said. Anything,
he's really good in it. So
Kurt Russell, again, not like in this current culture, I am channel flipping or changing often ever. But to me, I always considered him almost like he's a channel changing stopper. If I see Kurt Russell, I'm probably stopping to see what I'm watching for a while because he's
Except
that kind
Guardians 2. I didn't like that movie.
You didn't like Guardians 2? I like Guardians 2 quite a bit.
Didn't.
That's too bad. All right. Well, I do think of the 3 Guardians movies, it is the weakest of them. Mm-hmm. I've seen it 3 the least just because I've got a bit of Marvel fatigue, as we all do. And I just haven't taken the time to rewatch it like I'd rewatch some of the others. Yep. But I thought 3 was really quite good. 2 is definitely the weakest of all of them. My final choice is heading to the old racetrack, and it's not Days of Thunder. I love Talladega Nights. I could watch Talladega Nights right now, and it's another one of those so quotable, so goofy, so silly. Everything, every line, every bit, every gag just works for me. And it also, I think, is one of the... I think Step Brothers was in 2008, and I don't know how many movies he made in the interim, but when I think of classic Will Ferrell movies, it's like 2 before the end. He has a handful of classic movies. You have Talladega Nights, you have Step Brothers, and I think we're done. So It was the gasp of Will Ferrell, but it's a great fucking movie. I really like Talladega Nights. And Michael Clark Duncan, fantastic in that movie. Doesn't get the credit he should. It's what led to Step Brothers, I believe, right? Because it was him and John C. Reilly were like, wow, I think we did become best friends. Let's make movies together. So it was good. Although, as we've talked about with Winning Time, we keep coming back to that. Casting John C. Reilly instead of Will Ferrell in Winning Time led to the fallout of his friendship with Adam McKay. So all of these things swirl together.
So weird.
Yeah. But it's I don't know what else to talk about with this. Again, it's sports, Randy. What do I talk about? Mm-hmm. All I can talk about is how funny the movie is, and I'm not just going to sit here and quote lines at you for the next hour. If you want a funny movie about some people racing cars, go watch Talladega Nights. That's my big endorsement. Anything you'd like to say on it?
Completely agree. I mean, the odd thing is that you bring up Days of Thunder makes me realize how much I love that movie, and that was just on my cutting room floor too. So Robert Duvall, I will end up being like, there's nothing you can't do in a race car. Like I just turn into his like voice, and he has so many great quotable lines in that.
I really only mentioned Days of Thunder because you talked about how much you loved it on the Tom Cruise episodes.
Did I?
And I thought,
okay. I will say it again. Big fan.
I found out how much you like Days of Thunder only weeks ago. And so you should really take time to watch Days of Thunder again. You seem to really enjoy it.
I do.
We'll wrap it up with that. We'll do the social media plugs. I really need to get some more clips on our Wait Are These Guys Friends pod page because I did it and launched the page. And it's been 2 weeks of me saying I need to add clips. And here's the thing. I edit the show and then I'm too lazy to want to do anything else.
There you go.
That's why I really should only plug my own social media. Mike Barcode, MikeBarcode on Instagram, TikTok, where I also plug the show. Dear God, I will try to get some clips up. on the Way to These Guys Friends pod page. But it's more work, and I'm lazy. But also, if you want to leave us any comments, reviews, things, you can leave us that 5-star review, leave your comments anywhere you listen to this podcast, Spotify, Apple. If you have criticisms or questions and you want to get into it with us, Mike Barcode, MikeBarcode @gmail.com. Let's have a discussion. Let's know if you disagree or have any other thoughts on things. We'd love to hear from you. We'd love any feedback. Like I said, I put that poll out for the topic this week, and we had a handful of responses on my personal insert. It was cool to get a little bit of feedback on that. Love to hear more about what you think of the show or any other thoughts. But with that, I think we'll end it, unless, Randy, you have any final thoughts, anything we've talked about. Otherwise, we'll get out of here.
I do not. Appreciate the engagement and everybody listening.
Say the line.
And on that note, goodbye, everybody.
Thank God. That's twice I've had to remind you. If I don't hear the cadence, I'm calling you and we're re-recording. And we're not just re-recording the end. We're re-recording the entire episode. I'll delete the whole thing. I will delete the whole fucking thing and we'll start over. I will turn this car around. So. Okay,
yes.
bye.
Goodbye, everybody.